I made it to the wedding on time. That's the joke I told myself the whole drive over, because if I hadn't been thinking about traffic on I-75, I would have been thinking about the way my daughter's voice sounded on the phone last week. Careful. The way you talk when you're stepping around something broken on the floor and hoping nobody notices you're doing it. Tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight. Son or daughter of somebody, mother or father of somebody, wherever you're listening. I'm glad you're here. And a quick note before we start. Some names and details in this story have been changed, but what it has to say about family and about the cost of staying quiet too long, that part is true enough for anybody who's lived it. My name is Walter Ambrose. I'm 64 years old. I spent 38 years running heavy equipment and then a small excavation company outside of Toledo, Ohio, and I've got the back to prove it. 2 herniated discs and a limp in wet weather that reminds me every October. I'm not 25 anymore. My wife Diane passed 4 years ago this coming winter. Ovarian cancer. The kind they catch late because it doesn't announce itself. I still make 2 cups of coffee some mornings before I remember. That morning, the morning of the anniversary party, I stood in my kitchen in Perrysburg, in the house Diane and I bought in 1989 for $94,000. And I looked at the calendar on the fridge. Circled in red, Renee and Craig 25th anniversary, Bellingham House. My daughter Renee had married into the Whitfield family 9 years ago, and her father-in-law, Arthur Whitfield, was celebrating 25 years of owning his real estate firm, throwing a party at the same venue where he threw everything, the country club banquet room he rented so often. They'd started putting his name on the reserved plaque. Renee had called 4 days earlier to remind me. "You don't have to stay long, Dad," she'd said, which was Renee for, "Something's going to happen, and I don't want you to see it, but I also can't tell you not to come." I heard the screen door bang before I heard the truck. That was Ellis Bodine, my neighbor of 19 years, a retired plumber with a voice like gravel in a coffee can and the good sense to knock twice and walk in anyway. "You're dressed early," he said, pulling out his chair at my table, the one Diane used to call Ellis's spot, like it was written into the deed. "Couldn't sleep," I told him. "Big night. The Whitfield thing." He wrapped both hands around the mug I set down for him. "Ray, when's the last time your girl came around here for more than an hour?" I didn't answer that right away, because Ellis wasn't wrong, and we both knew it. Since Renee married Craig Whitfield, something in her had gone quiet in a way I couldn't put a finger on. She used to call just to talk. Now she called to check boxes. "Dad, you good? Gotta run." I told myself it was marriage settling a person into a new shape. I'd gotten real good at telling myself things. "You ever spend real time with Arthur Whitfield?" Ellis asked. "Twice, wedding and Craig's 40th. What'd you make of him?" I turned my mug slow on the table. "Man shakes your hand like he's trying to prove something to the room, not to you." Ellis made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "That's one way to say it." He looked at me over the rim of his cup. "Something about the way Renee talks when she mentions that family. It's off. Can't tell you how. Just is." I didn't say anything. Out the window, the oak tree Diane planted the spring we moved in had gone full and heavy with July green, the kind Ohio only holds on to for about 6 weeks before the heat starts wearing it down. "I'll keep my eyes open," I told him, and went up to change. 40 minutes on Route 25 heading toward the water. Nothing but flat farmland and my own thoughts. I thought about Renee, 32, a physical therapist, sharp as her mother, steady hands like mine. For the first 30 years of her life, watching her walk into a room made me feel like Diane and I had done at least one thing all the way right. Then she married into the Whitfields and something between us had shifted that I still didn't have words for. The Bellingham house announced itself before I hit the parking lot. White columns, a fountain out front that ran even when nobody was looking at it, a brass sign with the venue's name polished to a shine that seemed almost aggressive. Inside, the banquet room was already loud. A jazz trio nobody was listening to. Waiters circulating with trays. Maybe 60 people in cocktail dresses and blazers standing around like the room itself was something to be impressed by. Arthur Whitfield found me before I found a drink. 66. Silver hair cut close. The build of a man who still played racquetball 3 times a week to prove a point to himself. Real estate money. The old kind that had turned into new money 2 generations back and never let anyone forget it. He shook my hand hard, the grip aimed more at the men standing near him than at me. "Walter, good of you to come." He turned to the men. Renee's father ran heavy equipment his whole career. The way you'd point out a tool you'd borrowed once and returned late informative, not warm. I followed his gesture toward the far side of the room, and there was my daughter. Black dress, hair pinned up, and an apron tied over the top of it, carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres between tables because the caterer had apparently run short on staff, and somebody had decided Renee, a physical therapist with a master's degree, not an employee of this venue, should fill the gap. She saw me, and her face did something complicated. Relief, then embarrassment, then a smile she wore like a coat that didn't fit anymore. "Dad, you made it," said I would. I held her free hand a beat longer than usual. Calluses I didn't remember from massage work at her clinic, new ones, from something else. "You look tired. Long few weeks." She glanced toward the head table. "Arthur likes things a certain way tonight." Craig, my son-in-law, stood near the bar with his brother Dean, both of them holding drinks, neither one lifting a finger. Craig raised his glass at me from across the room and didn't walk over. Arthur called out toward Renee without turning his head. "Make sure that shrimp gets refreshed. Last time it sat out and went warm." Renee's jaw tightened for half a second. I'd been watching that jaw tighten since she was 6 years old. "Yes, Arthur," she said, and moved on. I found a chair near the wall where I could see the whole room and sat. Nobody told Renee to keep circulating. She just did refilling trays, clearing glasses, disappearing into the kitchen, and coming back with more. Sweat starting at her hairline under the banquet lights, while Arthur held court near the fireplace. Beer, no. Scotch. Refreshed twice by a passing waiter, not once by his own hand. An older woman lowered herself into the chair beside me, a small plate of something in her lap she'd clearly picked at without enthusiasm. "You're Renee's father," she said. Not a question. "Walter Ambrose. Peggy Sorrell. I live next door to Arthur. Have for 14 years. Come to these things because he invites the whole street, and it'd be rude not to." She paused. "Doesn't mean I enjoy them." I looked at her. "Your daughter's been on her feet since 4 this afternoon," Peggy said, keeping her voice low. "Arthur had a full catering staff booked. Cut it down to half 2 days ago. Said he wanted it to feel more personal." She glanced at Renee, balancing a tray past the fountain of champagne glasses. Personal for who, I wonder? Before I could answer, movement near the dessert table caught my eye. Arthur had finally left his circle of friends and was crossing the room with the stride of a man who'd decided something. Renee saw him coming. Her shoulders shifted, barely, the kind of thing only a father catches. Arthur stopped by the dessert table and picked up the cake knife lying beside the untouched anniversary cake. 3 tiers. White fondant, 25 years in gold script. "This cake was supposed to be cut at 8 sharp, he said. "It's 8:15. The photographer wanted the toasts first," Renee said. "I told you that this morning. I don't remember agreeing to that." His voice was climbing, finding its register in front of the room. "You've had one job tonight, Renee. Keep this running smooth. It is not smooth." "Arthur, just cut it. Now." In front of everyone, since apparently that's the only way things get done in this family. The room had gone quieter without going fully silent, the particular quiet of people pretending not to listen while listening hard. Renee set down her tray. Her hands were shaking, just slightly, as she picked up the cake knife. I counted the people close enough to speak up. I counted around 30. Not one of them made a sound. Craig stood by the bar, glass halfway to his mouth, looking at the floor. Dean checked his phone, and there was my daughter, standing in front of a cake with a knife in her trembling hand, because her father-in-law had decided humiliating her in front of 30 people was worth more to him than 5 extra minutes. I was 11 steps away. I counted them later, walking the distance myself when the room had moved on, and swallowed the whole thing like it never happened. 11 steps, about 30 feet. In 38 years running equipment, I'd pulled men out from under collapsed retaining walls. I'd carried men twice my size out of trenches that were filling with water. 11 steps was nothing, and yet I hadn't moved. Every muscle in me wanted to. But I caught Renee's eyes for half a second before she cut into that cake, and what I saw there wasn't a plea for rescue. It was something quieter. "Please, Dad. Not here. Don't make it worse. So I sat with my hands flat on my thighs and I watched my daughter cut a cake with shaking hands while her husband looked at his shoes. And I felt something colder than anger settle into my chest, the kind of cold that doesn't burn out. It just sits there, waiting. Arthur turned back to his friends. Somebody laughed at something unrelated. The party started up again, the way parties do, like nothing had happened at all. Later, near the coat check, I heard Craig's voice around the corner, low and urgent. You can't just let him talk to you like that in front of everyone. What was I supposed to do, Craig? Argue with him at his own party? I don't know, something. Anything besides just taking it. That's rich, Renee said, her voice cracking slightly. You didn't say one word either. Silence. Then Craig, quieter. I know. I found my daughter by the valet stand 20 minutes later. Car keys already in her hand. Eyes dry, but rimmed red, in a way that told me she'd learned to cry without letting it show. The same way her mother had during chemo. Dad, you don't have to stay, she said. I'm heading out anyway, I told her. I put my hand on her shoulder and waited until she looked at me. This isn't on you. Not one piece of it. You hear me? She nodded once, quick, the way you nod when you don't trust your voice. I found Arthur near the bar on my way out. Heading off already, Walter? I am. Thank you for having me. He clapped me on the arm, dismissive, already looking past me toward someone more interesting. Any time. I looked at him one long moment. We'll talk again soon, Arthur, I said. Something in my tone made his smile flicker just for a second. A small hesitation behind the eyes. Then it came back full wattage. Looking forward to it, he said, already turning away. I sat in my truck in the parking lot with the engine off for a long time, the sound of the party fading through the closed windows, and something in my chest had gone very quiet. Not the quiet of peace, the quiet of a decision already made, waiting for the rest of me to catch up. I didn't sleep that night. Around 2 in the morning, I gave up trying, went down to the kitchen, and sat at the table with a coffee I didn't need. The house made its usual sounds around me, the furnace, the fridge, the third stair that creaked and that I'd been meaning to fix for 6 years. Diane used to say that creak was the house talking. I thought about something Diane had told me 3 weeks before Renee's wedding. We were at this same table. She was in the middle of a rough round of chemo, hands shaking, appetite gone. She reached across and put her hand over mine. Walter, I need you to actually hear this, she'd said. I don't trust that family. It's not the money. It's the way Arthur looks at Renee like she's something useful, not someone he has to respect. She squeezed my hand. Promise me you'll watch out for our girl. I told her the chemo was making her anxious. I have never forgiven myself for that sentence. Ellis knocked at 6:30 the next morning, same as always, and took one look at me yesterday's shirt, 3 empty mugs lined up, and pulled out his chair without a word. I told him everything. The cake, the shaking hands, the 11 steps I hadn't taken. This isn't new, Ray, Ellis said, using the old nickname from our army days. The one that stuck, even though my name's Walter. 2 months back, Renee's car sat in front of your place for near 40 minutes one night. Engine off. Never came in. Then she drove away. He looked at me steady. That's not a woman who's doing fine. That's a woman who's disappearing a little at a time. My stomach dropped somewhere I couldn't find. What do I do? You already know, Ellis said. You call Marjorie Teller. Marjorie Teller had handled Diane's estate paperwork 4 years back. Sharp, direct, no wasted motion. Diane had liked her instantly. Honest eyes, she'd said. Marjorie's office sat above a hardware store on Conant Street. 3rd floor, no receptionist. Just a wooden bench and a door with her name on brass. She opened it before I knocked. Mr. Ambrose, you sound like a man who needed to come in today. I told her everything, factual, in order, the way I used to give job site reports. When I finished, she opened a drawer and pulled out a folder the same beige as Diane's old estate paperwork. Your wife came to see me, Marjorie said. March, the year before she passed. Made the appointment under her maiden name so it wouldn't cross with your family's files. My hands went still. She had 2 questions. First, whether, under Ohio law, a daughter-in-law's husband could compel the sale of a parent's solely owned home. Can he? Not directly. Your home is yours. Renee has no legal claim through her own marriage, and Craig has none through his father. However, she held up a finger, if your name and Renee's were ever both placed on the deed, or if funds were ever commingled in a joint account, that could change. I felt my jaw tighten. Diane made sure my name alone is on my deed, verified it with me directly. Her second question, Marjorie continued, was whether someone could be deliberately positioning themselves near her daughter's marriage in order to gain access to family assets down the line. The room went very quiet. She never came back to tell you what she found, I said. She passed 8 months later. Marjorie set the folder down gently. Your home was assessed last year at $315,000, well above the neighborhood median, mostly from work you did yourself. Arthur Whitfield's real estate firm has handled tax appeals for 2 townships in this county. He'd have access to valuation data that isn't publicly posted. He'd know exactly what my house is worth, I said. I believe he's known for some time. What can you do? Quite a bit. Marjorie picked up her pen. I'll request an audit trail on who's accessed your property valuation records the last 3 years. I'll also file a notarized declaration of sole ownership with the county recorder creates a clean paper trail. She looked at me directly. What I need from you is information. Has anyone suggested Renee be added to your accounts? Your will? My stomach turned over. Renee and I have a small joint savings account. Set it up when Diane got sick, so Renee could help cover things. Haven't looked at it in months. I said, check it tonight, Marjorie said. And Mr. Ambrose, I want you to bring me your daughter. She needs to understand what's at stake. That evening I pulled the bank statements from the drawer, where I kept things I hadn't switched to online only. 3 months, spread on the table. Account holders, Walter T. Ambrose, Renee A. Ambrose Whitfield, and a third name added in March, Craig D. Whitfield. I read it 3 times. I called Marjorie. It's there, I said. March, Craig's name is on the account. Don't touch it, she said. Don't move a dime. I'll file to have the authorization reviewed Monday. If it was added without your consent, it can be challenged. My phone rang at 9 that night. Renee. Dad, you up? For you, always. A long pause. The sound of someone deciding something. I almost called off the wedding, she said, 3 weeks before. Arthur said something at dinner about what Craig could realistically provide for a family, like I was a burden to be budgeted for, and Craig just laughed along with him. Her voice cracked. I sat there thinking, this is what the rest of my life looks like. What stopped you? Craig cried that night. Said his dad didn't mean it, that he loved me in his own way, that I just needed to give it time. A shaky breath. Dad, I found something. Craig's been talking to a contractor about updating the deed situation on your house. I heard him on the phone. He didn't know I was listening. The room went very still around me. Come over, I said. Tonight. She was there in 20 minutes, sitting in her old chair at my kitchen table. Hollowed out but not broken, she had too much of her mother in her to break easily. I set the bank statements in front of her. Her eyes found the third name. He never asked me, she said flat. I never signed anything. I know, I said. Margarine Teller is already on it. There's more you need to hear. I told her everything, Diane's visit to the lawyer, the property valuation angle, the joint account. Renee listened without interrupting, her coffee going cold between her hands. Mom knew, she said finally. Not a question. She told me before your wedding. I didn't listen. She told me too, Renee said quietly. The week before she said, you know your own worth, Renee. Don't let anyone teach you different. I thought I understood what she meant. I don't think I understood at all. I need a few days, Renee said, standing. To watch. Before Craig knows we know. She was right. If Craig realized, he'd tell Arthur, and Arthur would have time to cover his tracks. 6 days passed. Marjorie called to confirm the account review was filed. On the 7th day, Renee called at 9 at night, her voice different, sharper, awake. I found something in Craig's desk, she said. A printout of the property assessment. Arthur's handwriting in the margin. She brought it over within the hour. My address, the assessed value, and in the margin, in handwriting Renee confirmed was Arthur's from years of birthday cards. Craig to work on Walter. Convince him to add C+R to deed for tax purposes. Split proceeds after sale. I read it twice. I'd expected rage. Instead, I felt something colder and clearer, a picture finally coming into focus. He wrote this down, I said, in his own hand. We took it to Marjorie the next morning at 8:30. She read it again, wrote something on her legal pad in her quick, decisive way. This is Arthur Whitfield's handwriting, she said. I've seen it on township filings for years. She looked up. Here's what we have. An unauthorized name added to a joint account, a property assessment with handwritten intent to influence transfer of your deed. And I'd like to bring in one more voice, if you're willing, Renee. Arthur's first wife. His first wife? June Whitfield. Divorced him 11 years ago. She's remarried, lives in Sylvania now. I've had her contact information on file since your mother's original inquiry, in case it was ever needed. June Whitfield sat across from us 2 days later. A composed woman in her 60s who'd clearly been waiting a long time for someone to ask. Arthur convinced my father to sign over mineral rights on family land back in the 90s, she said. Told him it was a formality. It wasn't. My father never spoke to him again before he died. She looked at Renee. He does this. It's not new. It's just never been documented before. What does this get us? Renee asked. Leverage, Marjorie said plainly. We're not filing criminal charges. This straddles civil lines that would be slow and costly to prosecute. What this does is make Arthur Whitfield understand that continuing costs him far more than stopping. She slid a pen across the desk. One handwritten note from you, Mr. Ambrose. Under 4 sentences, no threats. I wrote, Mr. Whitfield, I built everything I own with my own hands. I know exactly what it's worth. Leave my daughter and her marriage alone to be their own. I believe you understand what I'm telling you. The certified letter went out that Tuesday. Marjorie called Thursday to confirm delivery. Friday evening, Renee texted. Craig moved into his brother's place. Wants space to figure out what he actually believes versus what his dad taught him. Not over. But it's honest, for the first time in years. Sunday, an unknown number called my phone. A man's voice, older, rough at the edges. Mr. Ambrose, I was at that party. Stood 20 feet from you when Arthur made your daughter cut that cake in front of everyone. A pause. I didn't say anything that night. Been carrying that. Won't give you my name. Still do business with him. But what happened was wrong, and I'm glad somebody did something. Another pause. You raised her right. Thought you should hear it from someone who was in that room. The line went dead. I sat in the quiet a long time. Arthur came to my door alone the following Monday. 10 in the morning. No company car. No lawyer. He looked smaller in my front yard than he had at his own party. Some current of certainty had gone out of him. Walter. Arthur. Come in. We sat at my kitchen table. He set 2 documents in front of me without preamble, a notarized removal of Craig's name from the joint account, and a signed statement relinquishing any claim to my property, both dated that morning. Marjorie told me what she needed to see, he said. I had 2 hours to produce it. I'll have her verify these. Renee's a good woman, he said quietly. Craig loves her more than he's ever shown. That's on me, not her. I looked at him, 66 years old. Hands flat on my table, nothing left to control. What I know, I said, is that my daughter married your son in good faith, and you spent years treating that as an opportunity instead of a family. What you do with that now is your business. He nodded once, the nod of a man accepting a verdict, and let himself out. 5 months later, on a bright, clean November morning, I stood at my stove making eggs when I heard Renee's car in the driveway. Craig had moved back in with her 3 weeks after the letter went out, once he'd separated himself, on his own, from his father's business and his father's house rules. The divorce papers Renee had drawn up as a precaution never got filed. Instead, Craig showed up one night with his own signed statement, full transparency on the accounts, on the deed conversation, on everything, and asked for a chance to be a husband instead of a son first. Renee came through the back door, laughing at something, hair down, looking more like her mother than I'd seen in years. Craig followed behind her, carrying a box of donuts, looking like a man who'd finally stopped performing fine and started actually being it. Morning, Walter, Craig said. It still felt strange, him calling me that instead of sir. But Renee said it was the first thing he'd changed on purpose. Months ago, deciding for himself what kind of family he wanted to belong to. We ate together at the table Diane and I bought secondhand in 1991. Afterward, Renee found me in the hallway and asked, quietly, if I still had the box of her mother's things. I did. In it, tucked between a folded cardigan and old photographs, was a letter Diane had written to Renee 3 months before she died, and never sent the kind of letter a mother writes when she's running out of time to say the right thing at the right moment. I'd been holding on to it, waiting for the day it would matter more than it would hurt. I think today's the day, I told her, and handed it over. She read it standing in the kitchen doorway, morning light coming through same as it had that whole hard year, and when she finished, she folded it carefully and pressed it against her chest, the way you hold something you intend to keep close for good. I am not a man who hands out advice easily. 38 years of building things taught me that most problems don't need words, they need patience, and the will to stay when everything in you wants to walk. But if this family taught me anything, it's this. Don't stand 11 steps away from the truth and call it respecting someone's wishes. The people who love you don't need your silence. They need you steady, honest, and there. If this reached something in you, if you've ever sat at your own kitchen table at 2 in the morning, wondering whether you said enough, whether you were present enough for somebody who needed you, tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight, and tell me your story. These stories exist because of the people who show up and share their own. And if this one found you at the right moment, pass it along to someone still carrying a story they haven't found the courage to tell. Thank you for staying with me to the end of this one. Until next time,